Okay.
All right. So let
So do
me
we just do you and I just kind of want to go over like some of
that
the guys that have
yeah.
been fired?
So uh let me tell you now. I was going to I'm just setting a couple things up. We are live
Mhm.
now, so uh
Okay.
yeah. Uh I'm not sure if anyone is on yet. It did just start. I just want to set up the thing how it should be. I guess window capture I'll do. Uh
hmm
window. Is there a reason that I won't bring up OBS as a window? Remove. Boom. Oh, that was my camera.
Oh, here. I wonder if this will give me
There we
better
go.
lighting.
Integrated. Yep. Da da da. Bang. In the setup process right now. Window capture. There we go. Create new. Discord. Yup. There it is. Okay. Now full screen. How does that look? Oh, I can't see how that looks. That's gonna be annoying. Okay. Oh, that's marginally infuriating. All right, pop out. There we go. Can I get the pop out on OBS? Not the video capture, the window. That's the thing. This is a new type of recording for me.
Really?
Yeah, I don't live stream often at all. So this is
That's funny.
I do it's relatively simple, but I'm trying to piece it together the right way. There we go. All right. Does it have to be this vertical layout stuff? Can uh, I guess we'll do this. Sure. Okay. And then I will piece it together like that. Boom. I want to have this ahead of that. Yup. Oh, we're doing it. Oh my god, I feel brilliant right now. There we go. Okay. That's a little. All right. Almost there. There it is. I hope someone's watching me like smile with grin as I slowly piece this together.
Dude, I have a tweet banging right now. It's my first in so long.
Yeah, no, I've Twitter's been like a pain, man, at times. Like sometimes you
Yeah.
feel like you tweeted something that's like, "Oh yeah, this feels really smart." And then you see it not get any numbers and then someone tweets the exact same thing but worded different.
Yeah.
And that one does way better and it's just like, "What the fuck?"
Yeah. Mine right now has like just under 4 million views.
There you go. What is it? Is it something
It
about
was
Grub?
no, it's not. It was from the game last night. It was I screenshotted the like first four picks of the Lions 2023 draft class and said, "Is this the best four-pick run a team has ever gone on?"
Mm. I'm gonna add Miller to the call, or let me text Miller before I. Oh, he said he's good. Whatever. All right. Create DM.
Okay.
I have a feeling this will mess up everything, but it's all right. All right, there we go. We have you. Now
Perfect.
we
Oh, I
just wait
can't
on
see
Miller.
anyone anymore.
Oh, there he is, the man himself. All right. Now,
Oh, here we
so
go.
I already mentioned this to Jackson. The call already started. Or the stream already started. Uh, what I mentioned to Jackson was you're gonna see one camera on Discord that is a lot worse than the camera that's actually going on OBS.
All right.
Because for whatever reason, my external camera doesn't cooperate with Discord, but it cooperates with OBS, and that is all that matters. So you have to see my
Gotcha.
like garbage pail version of whatever the fuck this is. Uh yeah. But so we were talking about we haven't really talked about it yet, but we were just starting up a little bit of a conversation about Grub. You of course as a Seattle fan, Jackson, I'm curious what your thought process is with that. If you could go ahead and go first for me while I set up once
Yeah,
again the
I've
OBS
uh,
thing.
I've I've gone really back and forth about it, but I actually do think his termination is much more of a positive thing than a negative thing. And I'm someone who typically, I follow by the philosophy of let a coach like stick it out and figure it out a little bit. But I thought Grubb's offense that he called was just a little bit too collegey. Like he totally refused to establish the running game on early downs. And, it was easy to understand at the beginning of the season when Seattle's right side of their offensive line was made up of Anthony Bradford and Stone Forsythe. But by the end of the year, like the run blocking had totally improved, and he had plenty of chances to just like run the ball with Walker and Charbonnet, who both look like very solid running backs right now, and he just totally missed his opportunity. I thought that his red zone offense was terrible. I thought it was too isolation based and not enough separation based. It was kind of like, DK, Bobo, and the tight ends just like kind of run a fade route and we'll throw you a jump ball. And there wasn't enough breaking over the middle of the field. And, that's a huge reason why you see Geno Smith's turnover rate go way up when you get to the red zone because he is kind of forced to force balls in spots that he wouldn't typically be throwing. And yeah, dude, like Seattle's offense in the red zone sucked. I didn't love his passing concepts and generally just his play calling. Like it felt like he didn't quite make the adjustment from college to the NFL. And when you look at Seattle's contractual situation, like next year kind of needs to be their year to push in all the chips if they're going to contend, because they've got, they really hit bombs on their 2022 3 and 4 draft classes, and eventually you're going to have to pay them. That's going to start after this next year. And so I really am glad that we let him go, and I'm hoping we bring someone in that is not from the NCAA. I kind of want someone from within the league already uh, to be calling the offense.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you said. I feel like that was always kind of the thought process with Grubb, right? He always,
Mhm.
like in Washington, of course, he ran a collegey offense. He didn't even try to
Right.
run the ball there. I wasn't shocked he didn't do that with Seattle either, even though, again, they had some great backs to give the ball to. That just wasn't really his offense. Like, he didn't want to do it. He does design a pretty nice, interesting passing attack, but no screen passes to help Geno Smith, no running game to help Geno Smith. It was all on him. And Geno Smith was good and he impressed this year. There's no doubt about that. But there was so much pressure on him, unless he was a Joe Burrow or some elite quarterback of that extent, the offense really wasn't going to get going too much. That's
Yeah,
my thought process.
exactly.
Miller, do you have much on
I mean,
Grubb?
not really. Obviously, Jackson hit the nail on the head, being he has the most experience with the team. But I will say, just from my personal experience, specifically watching y'all against us on the fabled day after Christmas game, that is one of the worst football contests I have ever witnessed.
Ah, yes.
I feel like that game was one of those ones where you can watch it and you can see both guys, both offensive coordinators, both guys running the offense for either team. Their time was nigh, and I'm really glad that Seattle made that move. I was a little worried that they were going to give him the leeway. You know, Jackson brought up the poor offensive line play. I was worried they were going to look at it and say, well, he underperformed because our personnel wasn't up to the standards we needed. We didn't have the line he needed. So I was worried they were going to keep him around, give him that excuse, try to retool and go back with him. But I'm glad they pulled the trigger. I think Seattle is moving in a fantastic direction. It's good to see the Mike McDonald and company aren't messing around and they're serious about what they want and knowing what they need to do. So I'm very happy y'all made that move.
Yeah. Do you have anyone in mind for the job at the moment? Uh, or you're thinking like Jackson? Of course, you being a
I
Seattle
don't know.
fan,
I
I'm
haven't really
curious.
thought about it. I was hoping that there would be some more firings across the league at the head coaching position that we could sneakily um get at the OC, because I know that there was a ton of talk about Mike McDaniel hitting the chopping block. But no, honestly, I'm not too sure right now. I need to get a better idea of like what the candidates look like.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Do you at least have a checklist or something along those lines that you really want? Like, even
I
if
need
you
it.
don't have names, do you at least have certain
Right.
traits that you
Yes.
want to look for in a
Yes. That I do. I really want it to be someone who is not. I don't want it to be another college head. I
Mhm.
want it to be someone who's been in the league. And it's also got to be someone who can call a pretty balanced offense, right? Seattle doesn't need to be run first, but they need to at least be able to have a multi-dimensional offense, right?
Yeah.
Because, oh, excuse me, I think especially earlier in the year, Seattle was at the point where like every running down, it felt like they weren't successful enough running the ball. And with that, they couldn't build anything off their play action. And so it just needs to be something where you don't have just one pitch. You need to get your curveball, your slider, and I'm really hoping that it's someone who at least comes from a system where it's multidimensional.
Yeah, and I feel like, of course, everyone wants to have that balanced attack. That's always a great thing in the NFL. But of course, you gotta commit to one side of the ball. The only thing is with Grubb, it was so exaggerated one way or the other.
Right.
So I understand the issue. I am a little bit surprised he's gone after 1 year, though. No, do you feel that way a little bit? Like, I thought he wasn't good, but I'm surprised it took 1 year.
I think in the previous regime, he probably would have been given a second chance, which, I would have been able to talk myself into. Given there certainly were issues that, like, you can blame for his, like, inability to call plays, but I think that there were also plenty of issues that were his fault, and I'm glad that, we're turning into a direction where we're going to find someone else who can adapt to these issues instead of crossing your fingers and hoping that he improves upon his many, many mistakes in designing the offense last season.
I think that's fair. Now, if we could shift gears a little bit, the Browns kind of did a little bit of cheating, in my opinion. The way I see it, Black Monday is kind of a holiday. And if Black Monday is Christmas, then the Browns are the one team that snuck downstairs and looked at their presents early. They fired Ken Dorsey and I believe the offensive line coach, or maybe it was the quarterback coach, one of the position coaches, a day early. Mainly Dorsey kind of grabbed my attention because that was never that great of a hiring to begin with, I thought. To me, it seemed a lot like they were trying to put a Band-Aid on the entire Deshaun Watson debacle. Is anyone against that firing, or everyone's kind of on the same page? Like, not only should that move have been made, but they need to make a lot more moves on top of that with the coaching staff.
Yeah, I personally don't think I care about firing Dorsey because, like, good or bad of an installer and a play caller, like, the offense just is rock bottom right now. Like, that is not going to be the spot that fixes the Browns offense. You really could put anyone in that position, and I don't think things are going to change too drastically. I thought Dorsey certainly had his fair share of problems in Buffalo. Um, I think there's definitely stuff to be said with, like, the breakout of Jerry Jeudy and some of the guys they put in that building that look like positive players. Since Dorsey's been there, so I'd probably say it's been more positive than negative, but I don't have too strong of an opinion on that simply because no matter who you have in that building, like, that offense is gonna suck when you have Watson under center.
Yeah, well, I think the thing that worries me and the reason I feel like that firing had to be made is because, to me, I don't know if you felt the same way. When Dorsey got hired, I saw that as we're doing this because we are expecting Dorsey to fix Watson, right? To me, I thought that was a little bit of the thought process going on there. And Watson still sucked. Like, he was terrible when he came in. So I feel like Dorsey had to go because of that. Because the fact is, whether you like Watson or not, and he's awful, I feel like everyone would agree we don't like him. He isn't good, but they're binded to him. They have to stick with him. Now, maybe they put someone else in, but either way, you're paying him all that money. You want to get as much as you can out of him. I think that's why Stefanski brought in a Dorsey, because even though Dorsey's offense is nothing like Stefanski's, he wanted the type of offense that the prime Deshaun Watson used to play in, and I feel like that was a little bit of the thought process with that.
Yeah, I'll let Miller talk a little bit. I've been yapping.
I mean, I literally don't care about this move. I'm gonna be honest with you. Just get that out of the way. Like,
Unimpactful.
Yeah, you could convince me that Ken Dorsey would be a perfectly fine coordinator, and I'd say, you know what, maybe because of the Browns not having a single quarterback on their roster. They do not have one quarterback that I believe should be rostered by an NFL team just based off play alone. The other stuff, obviously, with two of their guys. But just play wise, it's horrific. And then you also have Nick Chubb kind of underachieving this year, and, the run game never really being able to take off. It doesn't matter. The Browns are unfortunately back to the Browns that we all know and love until the whole Watson debacle is finally settled. And at what point does his contract expire? I don't even know offhand.
Well, the problem is that they backloaded it so much. They are in a bind now where they probably give him an extension.
That's
I
right.
like that's exactly what his restructuring was. I think it added length to it, or
Well,
at
no,
least
it didn't add length. The thing is, it is such a big cap hit. There's no
Right, it's
way
just
with their current cap situation that they're gonna stick with it. They are probably going to extend the deal so they could push the money down the line.
Yeah, dude, they're like I'm telling you, their solution to this is hiring a hitman. Like the only way they're getting out of this.
Is there? I'm curious as to you guys' thought process, ignoring how we feel about Deshaun Watson. If you're in the Brown situation, do you kind of cut your losses and keep him on the bench and just bring in the best offensive coordinator available? Or do you try and bring in another guy that might be able to at least bring back a little bit of the old Deshaun Watson?
I think you gotta.
Oh, sorry, I'll let you go, Miller.
Okay, I was just gonna say, I think you gotta give up. Like, at this point, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. It's done. It's over. I don't see a world where Watson goes back to Houston Watson or even a fraction of that. I think this is someone who is mentally weak. I think what he has experienced off the field, in addition to how poorly he's played and the way people react to him, has kind of ruined his football mentality. And I don't think he's somebody that you're going to be able to sit down with even the brightest offensive minds in the league and say, listen, we're going to get you back to form. We're going to make you a starting caliber quarterback again. I don't foresee that happening. So I think you got to try to work something cheap. I guess go in the draft. Where are they picking this year? Top 5 now?
They're picking second. But
Yeah.
really quick, Jackson, I'm hearing a little bit of feedback on your mic. Either.
Oh, sorry about that. That's probably my speaker let's try this.
Okay. I think that fixed it.
Okay.
I hear it
that's
a
my
little bit still. Maybe when you're
Okay.
not talking, can you mute your mic?
Yes. I can
That's
do
the
that. I'm
easiest
sorry.
solution to this. I'm not gonna do
I
this
have
entire
such
try
a
this, try
janky
that.
setup right now. I
You're
honestly,
completely fine.
if you guys can talk for like 2 minutes, I can adjust my mic.
Yeah, I mean
So,
it's that, or like I
just
said,
let
if
me
you just
take
mute when
over.
you're not talking, that's also a solution.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I will give my thoughts on this situation in like 2 minutes.
All right. No, you're
All right.
completely good. You're completely good. I feel like it's an interesting bind, right? The Browns dug themselves into this hole because they kept delaying and delaying and delaying the bulk of that contract. And now they're in a spot where his cap hit the next 2 years is $72 million, right? Both years. And they're way over the cap this upcoming season. They're stuck with him, right? Whether he starts or not, they're stuck with him. I wouldn't be surprised if they try to bring in another guy that kind of fixes everything or tries to fix everything. I don't think they're going to go back to Stefanski's style. I doubt it, right? Because we know Stefanski likes the under center, play action, run the ball heavy. That hasn't been the Browns since they brought in Deshaun Watson, right? Yeah. Or at least since Jacoby Brissett was playing, right? And they tried bringing in Dorsey, who's a little bit more of that spread type of guy. But yeah, it just didn't work. I feel like moving on from him had to be the play because all the quarterbacks sucked. You had NFL quarterbacks on your roster. Jameis Winston has been playing in the NFL for a long time. Dorian Thompson-Robinson, I remember he had a pretty good preseason at one point. He might not be great, but he's not that bad, is he? Right? It's a little bit of this conversation of, okay, Deshaun Watson look bad? Sure, maybe he's just bad. Jameis Winston, he's been in the league a decent amount of time. He doesn't look good. Okay, it's Jameis Winston. Now Bailey Zappi and also DTR, and it's just, you strike out 4 times. Clearly it's an issue with something else. It isn't just the batters. It isn't just the quarterbacks. I think that was a little bit of a reflection of, You have NFL talent, yet you're not putting up an NFL offense.
See, I get where you're coming from, but I think this is like a really, I don't know, it's like a damned if you do, damned if you don't in my eyes.
Hmm.
Because the quarterbacks he had to work with, yeah, they're in the NFL. Jameis Winston's been around the league, but Jameis Winston was the same Jameis Winston we've always known, where he's gonna have a couple like, hold on, is this guy an NFL starting quarterback again? And then he starts throwing these idiotic interceptions, making these horrible mistakes, and it's like, oh, okay, he's back. Famous Jameis is as famous Jameis is. And then DTR and Bailey Zappi, like preseason be damned. These are not starting quarterbacks in the NFL. These are not second
Yeah.
string
Yeah.
quarterbacks in the NFL. These are practice squad bottom feeders that the fact that they are starting for your team is pretty much an indictment on your quarterback situation as a whole, in addition to the garbage that's going on with Watson not being an NFL talented or an NFL level talent anymore. Like, I understand firing Dorsey, and I'm not like trying to come to bat for him because, like I said, I really don't care. I just think everything was wrong with this offense, and someone had to take the fall. And obviously, they can't make Watson take the fall. And cutting DTR or Zappy or Winston is not going to send any sort of message to anybody. That's just like, oh, okay, your backups aren't good, so be it. You gotta make a bigger move to kind of say we're gonna try to do something productive. And Dorsey unfortunately had to be the fall guy for that.
Do we think there's a chance that we see Stefanski go within the next couple hours here, or unlikely?
For his sake, I hope so.
Well, I think they said that he's safe.
Oh, they
I
did.
think that's what I
I,
saw. So
yeah.
I'm guessing no, but I wouldn't say he's, I think probably rolling into 2025, that's probably going to be the number one coach
Mhm.
on the hot seat, if I had to
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah. And I think that's fair. And listen, the issues that are going on with Cleveland, I don't blame on him. I don't. He strikes me as the type of guy that gets fired because of the terrible situation he's in. He's a coordinator for a year or two, gets another head coaching job, and then he's really good. Like, that's what I'm expecting with Stefanski, whether it's now or during the middle of next season, I don't know. But I'm expecting that type of thing to happen here. Uh, I find it interesting. We've talked a little bit about these offensive coordinator firings. We haven't talked about the biggest firing that has happened before Black Monday. Another firing that happened yesterday, literally an hour after the game ended. Gerard Mayo, down he goes. I mean, I was never a big Mayo guy, but I was a little surprised he went that early. Now, I will say I was hoping he'd be fired. If it was me, I would have fired him. If it was me, I wouldn't have hired him. He was so bad at the press box. He was not a very good motivator, leader of men, very clearly. That was made very clear. Look at the Ramondre Stevenson benching debacle. That was a clear example of him not being a very good culture guy. A lot wrong with that Mayo tenure, even though they developed two good young quarterbacks. I don't think that's much on Mayo. He's supposed to be a defensive guy. The defense wasn't great. What do you think about that firing, Jackson?
I think I pretty much agree with you in every sense of it all. It just didn't feel like a very inspiring hire when it took place. And I know he was Belichick's kind of handpicked guy, but even though Belichick is like probably the GOAT of football, given how that regime kind of soured out at the end, I don't think that's necessarily the greatest thing in the world. So I think moving on from him is, I wouldn't have been mad at them if he stayed, but I think it was just a bad enough hire that when you have a guy like Drake May in the building, I'd way rather, swing for the fences a little bit. I know that in terms of the next guy they're going to hire, Vinatieri, or excuse me, not Vinatieri, Vrabel, has been has been mentioned quite a bit, and I could see that because I think he kind of sticks with the hard ass philosophy that has kind of gone on with Patriots culture for the past 2 decades. I really feel comfortable predicting that this is finally the hook that Ben Johnson bites at.
You think the Patriots are the?
I do,
Why
and
is
it's
that?
it's a little freaky because it's not a very fun building. But here's the thing: Ben Johnson has been the most like coveted coordinator for a head coaching job
2 straight off seasons in a row, and he stayed. And he's kind of articulated why. It's because he doesn't really want to go to some bottom feeder that is going to put him on the chopping block, similar to what happened to Sala, when really the issues going on in the organization are beyond him.
Mm-hmm.
And he really wants to go somewhere with stable organizational, I guess, connection. And if you're looking for teams that are, bad enough to be firing their head coach, you're not really going to find a better organization than New England to stick yourself in. Obviously, they gave Bill Belichick full reign as a general manager when he proved himself as a coach. I really think that they could just give Ben Johnson the keys to this team within just a few years. And resource wise, like, I don't think that there's a better situation for him to be walking into. I guess you could argue Jacksonville if you really value Trevor Lawrence that much, but I think Drake May looks so incredibly promising. I would be pretty surprised if he ended up turning out bad, especially under Johnson. And then they have the most cap space in the league and a top 5 pick. So I think that even it's kind of a shell of a team right now, but the resources are just so vast. I think he could bring some of his boys over from Detroit, and I really think that this is finally where we're going to see him strike as a
I
head coach in the NFL.
I understand what you're saying. There's a lot of resources, and if he's really confident in his ability to put that stuff together, like, yeah. But you have to understand, this guy hasn't been a head coach before. I think he wants more of a team that already has the stuff there. Even if it's young, he doesn't have to do as much of the building from the ground up. Even if they have
Right.
all the tools necessary, I think because he's a first-year guy, and he's a first-year guy that's aware of the difficulty of doing that, right? We know that because of what he said last offseason. All that stuff along the lines of, oh, yeah, I'm going to wait another year. I think I could win a Super Bowl here. I don't know if I could really be a head coach quite yet. Those aren't his exact words, of course, but that's kind of what people thought his reasoning was for staying there another year. If he's aware of all that, I don't think he'd take a job like the Patriots. I think he would rather a team that has more of the pieces already there. Even if they're young, he doesn't want to be responsible for putting those building blocks together.
It's very possible. I mean, we'll see. I think he was pretty responsible for kind of building that up in Detroit. I mean, like the Gibbs pickup and the Jameson Williams, like he was in the building
Yeah,
for
but
all of
he
that.
was in the building, but it wasn't all his decisions. I don't.
No, certainly not.
Yeah, and listen, he was part of the evaluation process, absolutely. But you're going from the best offensive line in the sport to one of the weaker ones with the
Yeah,
Patriots.
definitely.
You're
Maybe
getting
the worst.
Yeah, you're
Yeah,
getting an upgrade at quarterback, potential from a physical perspective and what you could do physically with him perspective. More of a playmaker than a game manager in this situation, but you still have to develop a quarterback more than he has in the past. You're drastically changing your receiver core. I mean, drastic difference in that receiver core. I don't know. To me, it's just the jump from the most talented offense in football to one of, if not the least talented offense in football. It's difficult for me to expect Ben Johnson, of all people, to go there.
yeah. It's very possible. I mean, I kind of think that he has been sitting on the iron for long enough that
Mm-hmm.
eventually something's gonna have to strike. And I think for him, this is probably as good of a front office opportunity as it's gonna get in terms of teams with head coaching vacancies. But we're gonna see.
I also feel like Robert Kraft is a little bit more of a traditionalist. He's a little bit more along the
That
lines
could
of,
be.
I want the guys that are in-house. Vrabel isn't quite in-house, but he was a former Patriot. I think he's more
Right.
about that, bringing in a former head coach. He'd love to do that. I really think the writing is on the wall for Vrabel to go there. Even if there's, quote-unquote, better jobs, I think the fact he's a former Patriot, his trust in Robert Kraft and everything. Reports came out that he apparently already built a staff for if he goes to the Patriots. I think they're kind of interviewing just to feel out the playing field, but they're likely going to go with Vrabel, and I think Vrabel wants to go there too.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's probably the most likely candidate odds-wise, so it certainly wouldn't shock me.
Yeah, if we're talking about head coaching candidates, Miller, did you see the Bears' recent head coaching interview request?
Are we referring to a certain fella from New York?
Yes, we are. How do you feel about Mike Kafka
We're
potentially
not
being?
talking about Mike Kafka. We're gonna move. No, I'm kidding. I don't I don't know what the point is. I saw someone on Twitter say that he's like local, and the McCaskies have a weird thing for people who are from the Chicago area. They are obsessed with the idea of like, the Derrick Rose, the hometown kid coming in and saving the organization. I don't think this is the Bears literally being like, all right, Mike Kafka, this guy, he's a leader of men. He's an offensive mastermind. He's going to lead Caleb to the promised land. I think this is more of a, we got to interview a bunch of guys. Let's get as many offensive minds in the building as possible, get their opinions on what went wrong. And hey, this is a guy that's coming from another dysfunctional offense. Maybe he can show us some of what not to do. And that's my delusion talking. But uh, realistically, I do think this is more of like a due diligence thing and less of a serious contender for the job.
Yeah, I hope it's a due diligence thing. Listen, Kafka's low-key been getting a little bit of head coaching hype for the past couple of years now, ever since that win against the Vikings in the playoffs. You would think that would have died down, though, right? You would think. It really doesn't make sense that that's still a legitimate thing.
All I'm saying is
yeah.
if Kafka ever does get a head coaching job, he better give Ed Donatel a job because he owes that man his career.
That's fair.
I gotta leave pretty soon, but I'm
Mhm.
gonna leave you guys with this. Miller, you know who I think should be the head coach of your Chicago Bears is
Please be kind.
Pete Carroll.
Why?
His
I want to know your reasoning.
Well, you know that I will die on the hill that he never should have been fired. I know that McDonald is definitely a very positive source. I also think he gets too bad of a rep for being like a 1940s, like he wants to play like the same offense that like Army has.
Right.
And I really think that's just not true. Like statistically, he is a pass first coach.
Yeah.
And his track record with developing quarterbacks is as good as you're going to find with the job market, given, Russell Wilson came in as a third round pick. He's probably going to be a Hall of Famer. Geno Smith came in as like a total retread. And obviously, he's not that caliber of player, but certainly someone who's like deserving of a high contract in the NFL. Um, he's a great culture guy, which I think very clearly is necessary given how poorly that blew up in the face of some of the last Bears coaching staff. I really think if I was the owner of that team, that's who I would be calling first.
Yeah, I will say, like, genuinely speaking, outside of Ben Johnson, Pete Carroll would probably be my second choice. I do think a Pete Carroll hire would be fantastic. Because listen, just for my own personal selfishness, even if the Army offense allegations were true, I wouldn't be complaining.
I know. That's Miller will go 0-17 if he gets to see some quality run game.
Exactly.
Break
me the wishbone.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, well, I'm gonna head out, but that's the last little tidbit I want to add. Thank you for having me on, Patrick.
Pleasure.
Good to see you guys again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
It's been too long. We'll have to figure something out in the future, but
absolutely.
But yes,
yeah,
I've got a class to go to in just a minute here.
Yeah, good luck with your class. Good luck with
I appreciate it.
If you want to plug your stuff, go right ahead.
At JPowNFL on Twitter. That's really all I have. I kind of took down all the rest. I took down my TikTok. I'm not really doing that anymore. But yeah, just the Twitter.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I'm posting some draft content right now.
Yeah. Again, when the draft comes along, you're definitely going to be on the pod 100% when I can get you.
Perfect.
Well, yeah, I mean,
I'm excited. Yeah.
When I talk to you about draft evals, I love it. I love that time of year talking to people like you that just grind the film, because there's so much that could really be up to interpretation. I love it. I adore it. But thanks again for coming on.
Yes, thank you guys for having me. And have a good rest of your day.
Yeah. We're going to go on a little bit of like a pause here now, because I am going to start a new call with Mike and Miller. Of course, you're going to be back on that. So those listening, expect about like 5 minutes of complete silence as you see random cameras moving around. Yeah, so we'll be right back.
It's infectious for sure.
Yeah. All right. So we're back on. That only took like a solid like minute. I'm actually pretty proud. I thought that would take a lot longer. Setting up when I was just with Jackson versus setting up with Jackson and Miller took a
Thanks, man.
Yeah, oh, fuck you. That took a little bit more time. So I'm actually pretty proud. I guess with the 3-person recording, I don't have to move the camera or anything. But yeah, Mike, so you just saw your offensive coordinator get fired. We talked a little bit about it earlier, but just really quickly, what is your thought process with Grubb being gone? And is there any names that come to mind in terms of replacing him?
So I wasn't one of these Seahawks fans that was like shouting from the rooftops to get Ryan Grubb the hell out of the VMAC. I know a lot of people were, and I understand it because I mean his inability to stay consistent with the run game. I thought we got in too many pass happy scenarios too consistently, and with our shitty pass blocking O line, you getting Geno Smith killed. And I thought again, you have two competent running backs. I know you can't. I know they weren't able to run the ball super efficiently, but in the NFL, you have to run the ball. Like you can't just be one dimensional in the NFL. You have to run the ball, even if you're averaging like 3.5 yards a carry. And again, knowing Kenneth Walker and Charbonnet, one of those guys is going to break a run, change the whole game. And I felt like that was the key difference. And Mike said it today. He had a radio hit with a local Seattle station. And he said, hey, it was a philosophical difference between me and Grubb. And what that means when you read between the lines is I wanted to run the ball, and he didn't. He wanted to throw. And you go back to his time at Washington with Penix and Rome and Polk and all those good rate receivers they had, McMillan. Yeah, they were pass. And you can get away with that in college. You can't get away with that so much in the NFL. So I think his inability to stick consistent with the running game ultimately led to his demise in Seattle.
Yeah, I think that's very fair to say. But you also hit the nail on the head in the sense of if you didn't want to be pass heavy, why are you hiring him? Like, that's his style, right? And even if you're not a fan of that style, that it's not necessarily bad to be this pass heavy coach. I think the issue was more of it was pass heavy, but it was also one dimensional, right? And he was stubborn to be pass heavy. They had the ability to run the ball, and they didn't. And, even if you don't want to run the ball, you could still get Ken Walker involved in, the quick passing game. But that wasn't their offense. It was a vertical, get Geno Smith the ball, and we're going to be throwing the ball downfield, right? And Geno's going to get the ball out quick. And, there's going to be a little bit of JSN over the middle type stuff. But for the most part, we are trying to hit the deep shot. And I just hated there was no play action. There was no running attack. There was no screen game. There was none of that. It was all about the vertical stretching the field. And, that's fine, but you have to have that little bit of flexibility when you have the
They didn't give Geno
personnel.
any layups. They didn't give him a lot of
They
just
didn't.
easy dump
They
offs
did
or-
Geno no favors. I think Geno might have had the toughest job, or at least one of the toughest jobs out of any quarterback in the NFL this year.
Mhm.
Right?
I agree.
I mean, maybe Joe Burrow. But
Well, he has Jamar Chase, so like, you know what I'm saying?
yeah,
That
but
makes life a lot easier.
at the same time though, the offensive line was trash, and they also had a similar type of deal. But the difference is Joe Burrow, Geno Smith did a damn good job, but he's not Joe Burrow, right?
No, no.
Like that's the reality there. Is there a name that comes to your mind in terms of hiring, or at least a
So
checklist of what you want in a coordinator?
I want somebody in a coordinator. There is one name that's come to mind, and it's not the sexiest name, but I think Doug Peterson is a sneaky candidate for Seattle. I've been critical of Doug Peterson in the past. I like again. I'm not saying this is like slam dunk, whatever. We're getting Ben Johnson. We're not getting Ben Johnson, okay? But I think Doug Peterson is a guy. I think one of again Grubb's biggest downfall was his inexperience. Had never coached in the NFL before in any capacity, right? Peterson's a guy who's coached for decades in the NFL. I believe decades in the NFL. He played quarterback in the NFL. He knows the way the game works. He knows you got to run the ball. He knows you got to give your quarterback some relief. Doug Peterson was a quarterback, so from that perspective, I think it's intriguing, Doug Peterson, but I want a guy who is going to make Geno Smith's life easier because we see that with all of the quality teams in the NFL. For large chunks of the game, the quarterback, you got to make 4 or 5 big boy throws a game. But a lot of the game is protect him, give him a run game, give him some layup throws.
Yeah. No, I'm
Sorry,
glad.
my voice is going out.
Yeah, no, you're completely good. You mentioned Doug Peterson, and thanks for the easy layup with the transition because that's something we haven't talked about. An hour ago, just about an hour ago, Doug Peterson fired, right? I mean, it's kind of a miracle he lasted till the end of the year, a little bit.
Yeah.
I guess the thought process was, we don't have anyone we think could be interim. I think that's why he stuck till the end of the year. But again, who knows? That organization seems like it's in a really bad spot. Jacksonville. Is there anyone you think can really start to put that back together? Miller or Mike, if either of you have someone in mind that could, Doug Peterson is supposed to be a quarterback whisperer. Is there some type of quarterback whisperer that could really help Trevor Lawrence start to look like the guy they're paying him to be?
I don't think it matters until they handle their GM situation. Like, I don't think anything they do matters now that they kept, his name's escaping me at the moment. Now that they've kept him, nothing matters for this team. They're going to be bad again next year. They're not going to make any of the major moves they need to make. They're not going to progress in any way. They shot themselves in the foot hard. Jackson obviously brought up Ben Johnson already. We all know Ben Johnson is the hot head coach candidate. They screwed themselves on that because there is no chance in hell he's going to Jacksonville. I really do think he would have highly considered them if he would have had the ability to potentially bring a GM over with him from Detroit, or at least would have been on the same timeline as a GM like he mentioned he wanted to do a few weeks ago. And now you're in the situation where whoever gets hired knows they're getting hitched to a lame duck GM. They know they're getting a roster that needs a straight hard facelift, especially offensively.
Because of that GM.
Right. And you have ownership that isn't trustworthy because they kept that GM.
Uh-huh.
So now you have all these horrible, horrible variables that makes Jacksonville, despite, I know I'm a little bit higher on Trevor than you are specifically, Patrick. I love Trevor Lawrence. I think he, at his peak is one of the 10 best quarterbacks in this league. Unfortunately, he's going to get stuck with another head coach that isn't going to be able to maximize his talent because of things that are completely out of his control. And, for people like us that have to talk about him every week, we're going to be stuck with the narratives. That's where my mind always goes, obviously, as a content creator, is the conversations being had around these guys. But no, I don't. This is another one like the Browns job where I don't really care what happens because I don't think anything's going to change unless something like completely out of left field occurs and someone's like, I'm willing to take on the bullcrap just for Trevor, which in that case, then, we can have a different conversation when the time comes, but I don't foresee that happening.
It is so shocking how they decided to keep Bulky. You look at this team's draft history. I mean, you even look at the first rounders they've had. I want to bring it up really quick because they've been so bad at drafting. And I think that's why they're in the situation that they're in. I think that's why they had that great 2018 team and it just fell apart like that because they couldn't put the pieces together in the ways that he did. And now Mike is doing whatever he can to make sure that my shitty camera gets exposed. Oh, now I have to move it back. You're good.
Sorry, sir.
Camera
Yeah.
quality in New
Damn
York.
cough, dude.
Yeah, no, you're completely fine. I was just fucking around. The point is like I said earlier, on Discord, I have a terrible camera going on because for some reason my external camera won't work on Discord. So I'm just overlaying it. So when you did that, it moved my camera to the top right and it showed like the absolute toaster that I'm forcing you two to be subject to as we record this. But yeah, you look at their draft history. Okay, they hit on Brian Thomas Jr. this year. That's cool. No one else this year has done anything for them. And like Cam Little wasn't a good kicker. Mason Smith, I don't know how I feel like you might have been high on Mason Smith going into the draft. Am I speaking out of my ass, Miller?
No.
Oh.
No, I was not a Mason Smith
Who
guy
am I
at all. I
thinking
thought
of?
that was a horrible pick.
Oh, I'm thinking of what's his name? The Falcons guy. Oro.
Rook.
Yeah.
Rook,
yeah.
No, I loved Rook. Mason Smith.
Mason Smith from LSU, yeah.
I
He's
had a
raw.
lot of Yeah, he reminded me a lot of college Jervon Dexter, and I think you were there when the Bears picked Jervon Dexter.
Yes, I was.
To know how I felt about college.
Yes,
Dexter.
I was.
I was not a Mason Smith guy at all.
Yeah,
I'm honestly offended that you think that I would
well,
be
no,
a Mason Smith
I
guy.
remembered you were high on either him or Rook. And listen, Mason Smith, he's a project, so I guess we weren't expecting him to be good year one. And then beyond that, you have Jerry and Jones, nothing. Javon Foster, literally no one. Jordan Jefferson, DeAndre Pierce. And that's the thing, you have to hit on those fourth rounders, right? You have to, at least some, because you look the year prior. Anton Harrison, he's been all right. Brennan Strange, he has not been worth a second rounder. Tank Bigsby, he's okay, but a third rounder, right? Then fourth rounders, again, Ventrell Miller, Tyler Lacey, Yasir Abdullah, Antonio Johnson. I low-key like the Antonio Johnson pick, but he hasn't done much for Jacksonville at this point. Year before that, 2022, they didn't have a fourth-round pick. Their first two picks were in the first round, Travon Walker, Devin Lloyd. Walker's been all right, not worth a first overall pick, though.
No.
And then Lloyd, Devin Lloyd. He's an interesting story. But then you have Luke Fortner, who I don't even think is starting for them anymore. Chad Muma. And then they don't have a fourth-round pick, like I said. And then they drafted Snoop Connor in the fifth round. Right? Year before that, Trevor Lawrence, Travis Etienne, both of which have underperformed, expectations.
I think Travis Etienne's getting a second contract with the Jaguars. Do you guys?
I doubt it.
I wouldn't give him one.
Yeah.
Like Trevor, again, first overall pick, he was the obvious pick, and he hasn't even lived up to what people have thought his ceiling could be. So.
Yeah, and then it gets even worse. Walker Little was a second-round pick for them. Yeah, I don't even think he has more than 3 starts in his career at this point. Yeah. Andre Cisco, okay. Jay Tufeli. And then their fifth. Yeah, I don't.
Still on a roster?
He's apparently still in the league.
He started 3 games for the Bengals this year. He played 1 year for Jacksonville, didn't start a game, and only appeared in 4. And then ended up in Cincy.
Yeah, then their other fourth-round pick is no longer in the league. This is only 2021. This isn't that long ago. Jordan Smith, and then Luke Farrell, the tight end, in the 5th round. They are getting absolute non-factors in the 5th round. Not role players, not substitutes, not backups. Non-factors in the 4th and 5th round.
So are we convinced that Brian Thomas just saved Bulky's job? Is that what happened?
Maybe. That has to be it, right?
I mean, that was a home run. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, it was. It was.
After 100 strikeouts, you hit 1 home run. I expect a couple more.
Yeah, a broken clock gets right twice a day, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense that they kept Balky around. It really is nonsensical. I wonder, does he have Shad Khan blackmailed or something? What dirt does he have?
He's got him at a Diddy party or something. There's no other way.
There's
no other way.
It doesn't make sense for them to have kept him
Especially
around.
Because firing him would make it a lot easier to attract a top coaching candidate. Like you said, a Ben Johnson. Ben Johnson's not coaching the Jaguars team with Trent Baalke. He might if he could bring in his own guy. So I don't know what Baalke has done to keep his job. I don't know. bad organizations stay bad organizations for a reason. I don't know. I don't get it.
Yeah, it's not a good look. It's not a good look at all.
Honestly, if we're being real, I think that's probably the same reason why Joe Sheen is staying in New York. Well, you took Malik Neighbors.
Well,
So I guess
but this
I guess
year,
I guess you
at
draft
least
a
this
first round
year,
LSU wide receiver. Your job security is just 100%.
statistics show.
You're
Statistics show.
Contract Lynch.
Yeah.
LSU receivers every year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I will say in Shane's case, this entire draft class was pretty good for them. Tracy was strong.
Yeah.
Tracy had a
Yeah.
good year, right? Of course, Neighbors was spectacular. Drew Phillips was damn good this year. Tyler Nubin was pretty all right. Like, they had a good class this year. And that has to be why Shane is keeping his job.
Yeah.
That being said, I feel like I remember saying this about all these other classes, right? I remember back in the day when we looked back at who was their first round pick a couple years ago now. I remember they had someone. Kadarius Toney. Yes. Kadarius Toney we looked at. Well, no, but Kadarius Toney we looked at for a year, and we were like, oh, he's a good football player. He just got hurt a lot, but he's a good player, right? Remember week 3, he had 100 yards?
Yeah.
Right? And Daniel Jones at one point. I know this wasn't Shane, but still, it happens a lot with the Giants. They draft someone in the first round, and we were saying, rookie year Daniel Jones, hey, he's not bad at all under Pat Shurmur and this offense, right? He's not bad. And then what happened? A year later, he looks bad, right? Kadarius Toney, like I said, is an example. Evan Neal was terrible, but you look.
And Thibodeau, too. Thibodeau's not been much better.
Yeah, Thibodeau wasn't good, but there was a 2-year period where people were saying, hey, it's not that bad. And then it ended up being that bad. So, on one hand, it's nice that these guys look good right now. Deonte Banks was another one I was thinking of. That was the main one I was thinking of. Banks looked good his rookie year. He sucks now, right? It's easy to say after. Now, it would be even worse if they looked awful their rookie year. Of course, you should be uplifted by the fact they look good as rookies. But things can change quick. And it's been a recent theme with the Giants that they draft guys year one, they look pretty all right, and then they fall apart. Don't be surprised if Tyrone Tracy is struggling to keep the starting job next year, because I don't even know. And then Malik Neighbors becomes a locker
honestly,
room
the fumbles, they get out of control, and then we're talking about a guy who's no longer a starting caliber running back. Yeah.
Yeah, and that, again, if it wasn't the Giants, I probably wouldn't be saying this. But because it is the Giants, and this has been a theme for them, there's a little bit of frustration in that sense. And here's another issue, right? They have the 3rd pick this year. And this should be a big pick for them. It should be. Even if they don't draft a quarterback, it should still be a monumental pick. You don't want Daboll and Shane making that decision for you. You don't. It's just not what you want. Because year one with Daboll and Shane, year one of the Daboll and Shane dynasty, whatever the hell you want to call it, they were 11 wins, made the playoffs, beat the Vikings in round 1. That's a good year. Year 2, regression. They're under 500. Year 3, they got even worse. They're competing for the 1st overall pick. The fact they're getting worse each year is a major red flag, right? Young teams, it's fine to be a rebuilding team and be bad, but when you're trending in the wrong direction, even when you're bringing guys in, you added Brian Burns, you added all this talent, the fact that you were getting worse, as my dog barks because he agrees as a New York fan, that he's not a Daboll guy, there is no reason to keep someone around for a rebuilding team that is causing the team to trend in a downward trajectory. Because the most important stat is wins. You have to win football games. If you're not winning games, who cares? They are now spending money on players, right? They brought in these guys that we would think Daboll and the coaching staff likes. We would think they like Brian Burns. We would think they like John Runyon. And, John Runyon was good. And so was Brian Burns. But they brought in the guys they wanted to bring in. They drafted the guys they wanted to draft. And they have improved objectively as a team from that first year, from a roster perspective. Yet they're way worse from a record perspective. Who else's fault would that be?
also think there's something to be said, and I know like we could talk about that it was the right football move technically, but the optics of it are so bad when you draft a guy number 2 overall in Saquon Barkley. You let
Mhm.
him leave in free agency. He goes to your division rival and rushes for 2,000 yards. Now again, should they have paid big bucks for Saquon Barkley given the position of their roster? I get it, but the optics of it are look so bad for them, and the Giants fan base is so mad at them for doing that. I am shocked that he kept his job. I really am. I really am because Saquon has been the best free agent addition in the NFL this year. I don't think that's much of a debate. He's been the best free agent addition. This is a guy that they took number 2 overall, and now he's rushing for 2,000 yards for their division rival. They got the number 2 seed. They look like they're going to be a Super Bowl team. So it's just it's a hard spot to be in when you're Joe Sheen, when you're Brian Dable, and I really am surprised that he got his job back because, like you said, all of those factors, not winning, peaking in year one and going on a steady decline, the Saquon Barkley thing, like those are all contributing factors for him to lose his job, and he's kept it, and now they're going to trust him with the number 3 overall pick. The last time I read, I think they have a lot of cap space because they're not really paying anybody
They have a
outside of
decent amount. Yes.
yeah, outside of like Daniel Jones, which isn't like he's not like making 50-55 million a year.
Mhm.
But I think they do have a lot of cap space, so you're giving these guys a lot of resources to make another team, and when they've proven for kind of years in a row that they can't create a consistent winner, I think that's very risky from the Giants and John Mara.
Yeah, I don't understand. Like, on one hand, I understand it because they drafted well. Malik Neighbors looked good. They haven't had a good quarterback. But then again, at one point, you were winning with a bad quarterback. And then you started losing with the bad quarterback. So I don't know. To me, I don't see much of a reason to keep the guy around. Miller, do you have any overwhelming thoughts on this?
Not really. I think you guys hit the nail on the head. I do want to add, though, to Mike's point. I think the optics, especially with the Saquon move, not only letting him go, but the amount of confidence they had in letting him go, the fact that it was like a no-brainer to them to be like, yeah, we're not paying this running back. We don't need this running back. We'll be fine. And then to consistently get worse, and as was already pointed out, 2,000 yards on a division rival. Not only are they bad at their jobs, but they're confident in how, like, they are confident in the bad moves they make to a point where they are like bragging about it almost, it seemed like on Hard Knocks. It's one thing to be bad, it's another thing to be arrogant about being bad. It's just a really, really horrible situation in New York.
Yeah, I mean, I think a little bit of how they showed off the Saquon thing on Hard Knocks was more about this is like the big thing this offseason, and this has to be an entertaining show, so we're going to
Oh, sure.
exaggerate this as much as
For
possible.
for New York's sake, I hope they were playing it up for the cameras. I really do, because if they weren't, good lord.
Yeah.
Well, I'm saying how they went about showing it, right? Not.
Well, sure.
I'm
but
not saying
Editing
like,
can
the
only do
phone
so
call
much,
was
though.
like-
I mean, they didn't
Right.
say that.
Right.
Mm.
Yeah, they
I
didn't.
don't
They didn't
know.
like give him a script and just I don't know.
Yeah, and listen, when they showed it on Hard Knocks, Mara didn't feel good about it.
Right,
Right.
and that's another thing. Like, it's pretty clear that they don't see eye to eye at all. Mara doesn't trust anything they do, yet he's willing to give them this extended leash in spite of everything that you guys have pointed out. It's wild to me.
I think it's a little bit of we had Shermer, that didn't work out well. We had Jason Garrett for a year, that didn't work out well. We had Joe Judge, that didn't work out well. I think it's just about at some point you gotta stick to someone. I just don't like that mentality.
I don't mind Dable.
Yeah.
I don't mind Dable. Like I think that Dable's a fine coach.
Like, I would like to say that, but again, when you start up here and you overperform, and then you start getting the pieces to actually, like, expect that type of performance, yet you're now underperforming, that's a bad look.
In Dable's defense, though, his offense hasn't necessarily gotten the, like, huge pieces to continue moving forward. Like, yeah, they got Neighbors this year. Neighbors was super productive in spite of playing with, like, Drew Lock and Tommy DeVito got a start at some point, if I'm not mistaken. Like, I think there's a genuine argument that Dable still has potential as a head coach, We just haven't seen him with a competent quarterback as of yet. And maybe I'm reaching at straws here to try to make sense of nonsense, but like, I do think there's a world where if they continue to, kind of let Dable cook, for lack of better words, maybe something can come out of it. I just think if it comes down to like, get rid of Dable because you're getting rid of Shane, or you have to keep Shane to keep Dable, I think it would have been better to just cut your losses and move on from both.
Yeah, that's how I feel. Because honestly,
agree.
I'm
I
not
agree.
saying, oh yeah, you want to keep Dable and you don't want to keep Shane. I'm not saying the other way around.
Right.
I'm saying fuck that entire operation. Start clean.
Yeah.
Because what have you really built? Like, what foundation is there? You have Neighbors. Okay, that's a good player. Is that foundation? Is that some piece you're building around, quote unquote? I don't look at it like that. Defensively, you have a Dexter Lawrence, but his prime, it's only going to go on for so much longer, right? He already got hurt this year.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see much that you're necessarily building around at the moment. I don't see a foundation. And now you're asking this guy to build the foundation for you. I just can't trust it.
No,
I just
agree.
can't.
And look at like the Commanders. Like the Commanders, the rebuild in year one is pretty much complete. Like they are a certifiable good playoff team
Because
already.
they brought in the right head coach. That's
Adam
the reality.
Peters, Dan Quinn, like they got the guys,
Yeah.
and New York's
You
been
look
stuck in the
at-
mud for 3 years.
Washington, the Chargers this year. Look at Dan Campbell and what he did with Detroit. It all starts with the head coach, right? And the head coach has to have a plan as to how to build the team, right? I would rather be the shittiest team on earth with a damn good head coach than have the best roster on the planet, but an awful or even mediocre head coach, honestly. Because I know that great head coach will have a plan as to how to make this shitty roster into a very, very good one. That's
You're
how I
preaching to the
feel.
choir, brother.
Huh?
I said you're preaching to the
preaching
choir over here. I know that all too well.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. By the way, the Bears are interviewing Flores.
Give me a
Uh,
fucking break.
Yeah, no, dude, keep any sort of defensive coach fucking 15 light years away from this franchise. I'm done with it.
So what
Miller,
I'm
I
hearing
want to ask
is,
your opinion on this. I know
Uh-huh.
we're two big Bears guys.
Mm-hmm.
For you, is it Ben Johnson or bust? Because that's kind of how I feel.
I am willing to talk myself into a couple guys, but Ben Johnson's the only one where I'm like, this is it. We're set. We're good. Things are happening. I could talk myself into like a Pete Carroll. I could probably, I that's fair. I know you're also a little bit of a Seahawks guy, so I get it.
Yeah.
But no, I think I could talk myself into him. Jackson was on here earlier, made a great point about the quarterback development and kind of some of the narratives around Pete Carroll that aren't exactly fair regarding his offensive philosophy, which is pass first, even though he gets this like old school, like he used Army football and as an example, like that type of mentality offensively.
Yeah.
And he's got the leader of men quality they keep clamoring about. It I could talk myself into him. I could also talk myself into a guy like Vrabel, maybe, if I wanted to get really delusional, but I think it's Ben Johnson or bust in the sense of being confident about this team beyond next year. Because anyone else, it's like, I need to see what happens next year. And then if things aren't as bad as they were this year, maybe, but.
Yeah. My thought is, and it's pretty simple. The Bears will go as far as Caleb can take them.
Mhm.
So you need to do everything in your power to help Caleb in that, right?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
But to me, Ben Johnson, like I don't know why he gets this bad rap of being not a leader of men. Everybody talks about the culture in
Right.
Detroit. He's been there. He's
Mhm.
been right under Dan Campbell. So how is he not gonna take some of that culture aspect to Chicago or Jacksonville or wherever he goes? Not Jacksonville anymore because of the Balky thing.
Could
but
I say
Yeah.
my piece on Ben Johnson, right?
please,
And I guess I'm the pessimist here, like usual, right?
Yeah.
This guy.
I think Ben Johnson's a great offensive coordinator. Do not get me wrong. That being said, it's not like Ben Johnson was there from the beginning. Anthony Lynn was originally the offensive coordinator there, right? Meanwhile, Aaron Glenn was the defensive coordinator the entire damn time, right? If you're trying to get the culture from Detroit, I feel like Aaron Glenn is the guy. Although you're saying you want an offensive guy, which is why you want to lean towards Ben Johnson. And I think it's fine to give him a shot. I hope someone does give him a shot. If I were a betting man, I would bet against him being one of those great coordinators, not a great head coaches, because you look at some of the issues, right? Running trick plays when your team is up big. Some of the game management stuff. I don't know. And that's a key part of being a good head coach, right?
Can you tell me
Here's my
one time?
point to that. Here's my point to that. Sorry, I just
No,
want to
go
make
ahead.
this
Go
one
ahead.
specific point. With the trick play thing, with the McCaskies, if he did that one time, if we're up 40 against some bottom feeder team, he runs one like fade to Darnell Wright, the McCaskies are going to give him a good talking to, and he's not going to want to do it again because they're going to be on his ass immediately. They hate that shit. They are so against like the flashiness, or the flashiness is a bad way to put it, although it's not exactly inaccurate. The non-sportsmanship aspects of football, which I think they would absolutely view that type of behavior as. I think for better or worse, they would cap Ben Johnson in that regard if that's like a legitimate concern you have.
And I'll say too, piggybacking off that, right now Ben Johnson is auditioning for any team that he's potentially interested in. So, yeah, you're talking about, I'm sure, the Jared Goff falls down. Oops, I dropped the ball. Psych! I get up and I throw a touchdown. That was kind of a tongue-in-cheek like elbow to the Bears and the Jets and the Patriots and the, hey, I can do cool shit like this.
But
Do I think he's gonna do that against some bottom feeder?
No one is questioning his ability to draw up silly shenanigans play. Like, no one is questioning that. People are questioning the culture stuff. And that's an example of bad culture stuff. And you want to ask, oh yeah, why? Or that's more of an example of poor game management. But that's also a little bit of culture. You want to ask a little bit, why do people have a bad rep about his culture? And it's not necessarily that he's a bad culture guy. It's just I don't think he's the reason for that Detroit Lion culture. Because you look at the defense, right? You have these hard-nosed football player personalities out there. The Aiden Hutchinsons, right? The Alex Anzalonis. These guys that are like football personalities. Then on the offensive side of the ball, what do you have? You have guys like Jamison Williams throwing the ball at other players on the opposing sideline, getting unnecessary penalties, right? It's just more examples of kind of bad football character, and there's more of those examples on the offensive side of the ball. I think that's why that comes a little bit. I'm not saying he's
I'll give two rebuttals.
Yeah,
give two rebuttals. Number one, the Bears need to worry about winning games before they start worrying about how aggressively they celebrate winning games. That's number one.
But
two.
But it starts there. That little thing, it's a little example of the type of stuff that losing teams do. And winning games starts with building the right culture.
I think you're
I don't think Johnson's
there a little bit. I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm not gonna lie. Also, I don't want to hear nothing about Aiden Hutchinson being hard nosed when he's on State Farm commercials doing ballerina moves. Okay, that's what I want to say. My point is,
I just want to say to that point, the damn Pittsburgh Steelers of the 70s were doing ballet and shit, like Lynn Swan and them.
And
we can't be throwing guys under the bus for ballet.
No.
That's hard
a smile, man.
He's working on his footwork.
Listen.
Working on his footwork.
And Joe Namath used to do leggings commercials. I get it, bro. Get your money. Do your sponsorship. I have no issue with that. What I'm saying is, I think, if you're talking about a team who, again, in your eyes, he's too what's the word I'm looking for? Braggadocious. He's too braggadocious. He's too out there. He's gonna, piss off a lot of these hard-nosed, guy, lunch pail type of guys, whatever. Shit, maybe that's what the Bears need, okay? Maybe the Bears need a guy like that, because my whole life, all I've ever heard is the Bears are hard work and they're lunch pal and they get to work and they have great defense. Guess what? They haven't won shit in my lifetime, okay? They've won one NFC Championship game. So maybe the Bears do need a little bit of a culture move. Maybe they need to transition into that mode of being, you know what, we are going to be flashy. We are going to score a lot of fucking points, and we're going to shove it in your face. Maybe that's what the Bears need. And I think if Ben Johnson can be that guy, nobody will give a shit about the fact that we're throwing it to Darnell Wright with up 25. Because if the Bears are up 25 to begin with, everybody in Chicago is going to be happy. And you made the point about the McCaskies, lighting him up if he does something like that, which I don't doubt. I think if that happened, they would. But could they really be that fucking pissed off if we're actually in the playoffs or we win the division? God forbid we sweep Green Bay. Got a little taste of it yesterday. It was like crack. It was actually insane. I didn't remember what that felt like. But
yeah,
like my point is that I feel like you're grasping at straws a little bit, and your problems you're talking about champagne problems for a beer organization, okay?
Right.
These are problems that if they're problems, that means we're in a good spot with the Bears right now.
I will say too,
Oh yeah.
to piggyback off that as well. Number one, if we consider the player you're pointing at being a problem is Jamison Williams, have we considered maybe just Jamison Williams as a problem, and that's
just a
not a
weirdo.
Ben Johnson thing? Like
Yeah.
every team has that one guy. You know, the Bears obviously have Tyreek Stevenson, who was
Yes.
involved in the play you're referencing.
Yeah.
Some guys just, you know, they stand out a little bit among a sea of non-football guys, of football guys, I should say. Because you look at their offense, they have plenty of football guys there. You look at the 5 big guys in the trenches across the board, every single one of them a football guy. David Montgomery, I can tell you from experience, one of the biggest football guys out there. Sam Laporta, definitely a big football guy. Jahmyr Gibbs, he's a little flashy. I'd still argue a big football guy. There's plenty of guys on that side of the ball that have that mentality. Sure, they might be a little flashier, but it's because Detroit has had one of the most exciting offenses in football over the last couple of years. And, you know, as was already pointed out, they're comfortable saying, look, we know we're the best, we're going to act like it, and we're going to embarrass you week in and week out. I agree 100% with the point of the Bears needing something like that. Because you look at this team, who's the face of the franchise now? Caleb Williams. What is Caleb Williams inherently? Flashy. He is one of the flashiest young quarterbacks in the league. Even with everything going on with this team, all of the mess, the biggest highlights you can point to from this season are Caleb Williams playing backyard football, doing goofy, flashy shit. Now, sure, they're not trick plays and whatnot like Ben Johnson once, but do you really think he's going to see Caleb Williams throwing like the Air Jordan touchdown that got called back to Roma Dunze against the Seahawks and think, yeah, like he's going to see that and go, I have a couple things. I have a couple things in mind.
Yeah.
He's going to see Keenan Allen throw that interception against the Packers this week and go, I would have drawn that up better. I would have had a better route for the running back. That would have been a score.
Yeah, I'm sure he wouldn't give the ball to Doug Kramer at the goal line. So maybe the trick plays are going to save the Bears. Actually, is this the argument that we're giving you right now?
So
thank you for pointing out Doug Kramer. Oh my God, I hate Doug Kramer.
I know. I had to do it. I know you hate Doug Kramer, so I had to throw you a bone there.
Here's my piece. You said I'm grabbing at straws, and my reply to that is absolutely. Because the reality is, and I say this constantly with a lot of these issues, in the NFL, shit is unpredictable, right? There are a lot of examples of great coordinators who just can't be a head coach. So many. That's why it's in the intro of the podcast, right? There are so many examples of that. And to me personally, right, I find it difficult to believe that Ben Johnson is going to be great, and Aaron Glenn's going to be great, and Brian Flores is going to be great. Well, Brian Flores was a head coach before.
Flores has already proven he's
Brian
great.
Flores has already proven. Okay, but Wes Phillips is a guy that I really like that I wanted to mention later on here. He'll be great. And Bobby Slowick will be great. And all these guys will be great. I find that difficult to believe. So I'm going to take the little shit like trick plays when your team is up big, and the fact that last year he was able to become a head coach and he said, I don't know if I'm quite ready yet. That little stuff is at least hinting towards him maybe not being head coach material. Am I saying the Bears shouldn't hire him? Hell no. I think the Bears would be a good hiring for him. I think the Bears should hire him because he does deserve a head coaching job. But I'm saying if I were to try and guess which guy isn't quite a head coach, I'd probably say Ben Johnson. But that being said, I could be drastically wrong because you don't know until you give him that opportunity.
So your two big complaints against Ben Johnson are self-awareness and a touch of whimsy.
Yes, very much.
I'll be right back.
No, I mean, like, again, I don't want it to seem like
I'm curious what he's cooking here. You could continue.
I don't want this to seem like a WWE tag team, but I gotta just jump back in the ring here and tell you, like, look at his resume. Like, a lot of these guys who get promoted to become a head coach, I don't think have the experience or have the success that Ben Johnson has had in Detroit. And we're talking about Detroit, Detroit, the place that had not won a playoff game in 35 years, despite having some of the most talented offensive players ever. This organization, Detroit, has been the shit on everybody's shoe for the longest time. Dan Campbell came in. I know Ben Johnson was a little bit later than he did. He didn't come in right away. But you have to attribute a lot of the success to Ben Johnson, the way he's run the offense.
And I'm
Because
not
not only has it been
disregarding
his
that. I'm not disregarding that.
what I'm saying is my point, I guess, that I'm trying to make, and I'll skip the middle part there. I don't think you can criticize him for any of this flashy, flamboyant, whatever stuff because it works. Like if he's throwing flea flickers up 30 and it got Jared Goff killed or Amon-Ra St. Brown dropped, it was picked or whatever. If it was affecting the game at any point, I'd be like, okay, yeah, he needs to chill out with
But
that.
it's
He
a
needs to
microcosm of something bigger, right? And that, as an offensive coordinator, it's just a little issue. As a head coach, that might be the difference between a crucial, game-winning drive where they chew the clock and a big pick. And I'm not saying that specifically, right, them running a trick play, but I'm saying something along the lines of, I'm going to go ahead and be extra flashy on this third down to start the game. And, what's this? I ended up doing something stupid. Even if it works more often than not, it's just the unnecessary willingness to show certain plays on film and the unnecessary, hey, I'm going to do this. The unnecessary actions are a little bit of, a problem.
Don't you think that also works in the sense of like, say they line up in trips and they run a hook and ladder to Jahmyr Gibbs or whatever. You're a defensive coordinator. You're watching film on Ben Johnson. You now also have to prepare for that hook and ladder or that flea flicker or that whatever. It gives you more shit to worry about. And so like I know one thing you're talking about is the Cowboys game, right? They were destroying the Cowboys. They didn't have to run all those trick plays. Well, the next week they played the Minnesota Vikings and Brian Flores. And I'm sure Brian Flores stayed up all night thinking, what trick plays are the Lions going to run? What are they going to do? What are they when they come out in bunch or trips or 21 personnel, whatever? They have all of these, tricks up their sleeve. And then when they played the Vikings that next week, they shot them straight. It was, we're going to run the ball. We're going to have a quick passing game. They didn't really run any of those tricks. But again, in the back of Brian Flores' mind, he's thinking they can run this, that, whatever. Again, I just think it adds another layer to your offense where defenses are just stuck having to prepare for so many more things, and it gives you an advantage on offense, in my opinion.
Yeah, but
what else is an advantage?
You know what else is an advantage? Pulling that fake fumble out of nowhere, right? And then that's a free touchdown, right?
Yeah.
Like, that is the fact he's willing to put that stuff on film is my issue, right? That's kind of what I'm pointing at here. Like, that is how I choose to look at this.
If your bag is that deep, I mean, just keep pulling out of it is what I
yeah, and I think that's probably his mentality. But again, it's just one of these, there's no way all these coordinators become good head coaches. There are so many examples of guys who are just coordinators. And to me, I see those little issues, and I'm like, maybe that's the stuff that
I think Ben
can
Johnson
tell
has
us.
Such a higher chance to be a good head coach versus Bobby Slowick, whose offense has dropped off a cliff from last year. You talked about Aaron Glenn. I don't know. Forgive me for not being the biggest Aaron Glenn guy.
Well,
Brian Flores.
If you're going to talk about the culture in Detroit, you got to love Aaron Glenn. Because he was really there from the beginning. And, Aaron Glenn is an X's and O's guy. I'll agree he's stubborn, right? Yeah. And he's too willing to do that, man-heavy blitz type stuff.
Yeah,
I will not
very well last night.
Yeah,
to his credit.
I will not disagree at all. However, if you want the Detroit Lions culture, bring in the guy that was there from the very beginning for Detroit. Bring in the guy that has most of those, the players that epitomize that team and that culture. They're all on the defensive side of the ball. That's the reality, except maybe Penny Sewell, right?
Yeah.
Aiden Hutchinson, he was on the defensive side of the ball, and he was born and raised there, right? Like, he developed in Detroit, right? Jared Goff, who was, the quarterback for them, he didn't develop that quarterback, right? You're talking about him going to the Bears. He didn't develop a quarterback yet. We don't know how he would do it. I'm not saying he would necessarily do a bad job, but I'm saying that's a big question, right? You look at, the lead backs for them. Jahmyr Gibbs, okay, that's a Detroit guy, but then David Montgomery already had a career before that. Their offensive line, which is a great unit, a lot of those guys weren't developed under Ben Johnson. Penny Sewell was, and that's why I'm not saying he can't develop talent, because he clearly can. But Aaron Glenn, all of those guys were under Aaron Glenn, and they became stars under Aaron Glenn. Meanwhile, you look at the offensive side of the ball for Detroit. He could definitely develop talent, but he can't. We don't know. It's a question if he can develop the most important part, which is the quarterback. Meanwhile, on the defense, you don't have to really worry about that. But then again, to your credit, if the Bears bring in an Aaron Glenn, he's going to know even less about developing a quarterback than Ben Johnson.
I don't think you're giving Ben Johnson enough credit for his reclamation project of Jared Goff. Because 3 years ago, we were talking about Jared Goff like we were Jimmy Garoppolo.
Yeah.
And what he is now is a very good NFL quarterback, albeit has limitations with his athleticism. You know, he's not as raw and talented as Caleb Williams. I don't think anybody disputes that. But he plays better quarterback. Why? They gave him a run game. He has an offensive line. He's got good receivers. He's got a good scheme. He's got good play calling. Like, that is a lot what it takes in the NFL to be a good quarterback. So Ben Johnson has given Jared Goff the tools and the, resources to be the best version of himself. And that's exactly what I think he will do for Caleb Williams. Caleb Williams.
And I think that's fair. I think if they were to hire a Detroit guy, Ben Johnson would be their pick. If you're asking me overall, who would I rather have as a head coach, I would pick Aaron Glenn because I think he's more of a reflection of that culture. Even if I think Ben Johnson is the better X's and O's guy, the best head coaches aren't the best X's and O's guy. Not always. Sometimes, Sean McVay, he is.
Andy Reid is pretty good.
Andy Reid, but not all of them, right? Dan Campbell isn't a great X's and O's guy.
No.
But he hires the right people. And when you can hire the right people, that makes a big difference. Who are they going to hire? There's so many aspects of head coaches. Just because this is a head coaching live stream, let's make it very clear. There are so many little aspects of being a head coach in the NFL. It's impossible to tell who will be a good head coach, who won't, who will. It's damn near impossible. Oh, okay, there he goes. Not sure what that was about. I thought he was going to come back in like a costume or something. Because he said a little bit of whimsy.
I love you shirt.
Yeah, something like that. He had something he had to. Okay, completely understandable.
I gotta hop off soon, anyways.
Yeah.
But I didn't mean to spend the whole episode talking about Ben Johnson. But
no, listen,
when you saw my sweet prints like that, I have.
Well, it's an important thing, and listen, I think he should be hired as a head coach. There's no doubt about it. That being said, we have no idea how good he'll be. We have no idea how good anyone will be. I just think with Ben Johnson, there's a couple more red flags, right? Some of that stuff, like I said, the trick play stuff, to me, it doesn't matter as an offensive coordinator. As a head coach, it might, right?
Let me ask you. You are Kevin Warren and Ryan Poles, who knows? You're Kevin Warren. You're the Chicago Bears. You have any pick of head coach, anybody who's been thought of a candidate. You have the number one pick. Everybody wants to come to the Bears. Who are you hiring?
The interview process is important, right? And the thing is, I can't interview these guys, so I don't know.
Okay.
But here is and again, I kind of mentioned him earlier, and I want to mention his name again. Wes Phillips, the offensive coordinator for the Minnesota Vikings, revived the career of Sam Darnold. He worked under McVay. We know how that McVay tree goes on the offensive side of the ball. He worked under McVay. He worked under Kevin O'Connell, which is an extension of the McVay tree. Those guys, they work. It's just like damn near 100% hit rate when they're on the offensive side of the ball. Brandon Staley is the one exception, and if you're going over the entire Shanahan tree,
Shane Waldron is also
wasn't the head coach.
He worked under McVay though.
Yeah, but I'm saying he wasn't the head coach. Sure, okay.
He couldn't even make it the head coach. He was so
he couldn't even make it. Okay, that's fair. That's fair. But for the most part, these guys are damn near always successful. I think Wes Phillips would be a damn good hire. And that's partially because he's the son of Wade Phillips, who was a former head coach. I think that makes a big deal. Big difference, right? The fact he can consult someone like that was at one point a head coach, a successful one. I think that's a really big deal. But a big part of it was I know he could develop a quarterback. and the coaching tree he's from. If I'm being honest, those are the two main things, right? That along with the fact that he's the son of Wade Phillips, I feel more certain about him being an NFL head coach on the offensive side of the ball than anyone else that doesn't have head coaching experience. Do I think Chicago should bring in a former head coach? Personally, I'm not a big fan of bringing in former head coaches. I'm not, especially when you're a young team like the Bears. You know, I want to not just hit on my head coach. I want to get a grand fucking slam with my head coach. I want to knock it out of the park with that hiring. And I think that Wes Phillips would be a great guy to do that with.
Yeah. One thing I will say, and I forgot to mention this, and this is not so much Ben Johnson specific, but it's about Ben Johnson, but not about him exactly. I'll explain in a second. So I think everybody can agree Ben Johnson is the maid of honor in terms of this coaching cycle, right? Everybody wants their chance. You know, he's the popular girl in high school that everybody wants to talk to, right? Just from an optics standpoint, if the Bears land Ben Johnson, I will take them much more seriously as an organization because they saw the big fish, they caught the big fish, and the big fish wanted to come to Chicago, right? If they go with Wes Phillips, who, you know, you said you're very happy with, I like that. I think it's a very sneaky under the radar hire. The problem is that that'll be seen from a lot of people as the Bears not willing to go out and act like they are the Chicago Bears. So I think if you get a Ben Johnson, not only are you telling your fans, hey, we're serious, you know, we're going to go do this. Like we're going to act like we're a team from Chicago who can go out and get the big dogs. But obviously you have optimism for Ben Johnson as well. Wes Phillips, if Wes Phillips was hired, first of all, a lot of Bears fans would be like, who the hell is that? Second of all, you know, there would be a reaction of like, is this like their sixth choice? Like, is this a guy who's not really? And again, I like what you're saying. I don't necessarily disagree with you, but I think part of what you have to consider is the optics of it. You hired Matt Eberflus, who even at the time it was like, who the fuck is this guy? Like, we're the Chicago Bears hiring the Colts defensive coordinator. That doesn't make a lot of sense. And you have a division with Kevin O'Connell, Matt LaFleur, and Dan Campbell, right? A lot of good coaching in your division. I think again, just the optics of going out and getting the big fish, it would heal so much in Chicago. So that's another argument for Ben Johnson. Not exactly him as a coach, but just I guess
And listen, I think Ben Johnson would be a good hiring for them. I think it makes a lot of sense considering the context of the team. My thought process again is just I see the most red flags with him, but that doesn't mean he shouldn't be getting a head coaching job. He absolutely should, because he deserves it. Because again, we don't know for sure until we try it, right?
Yeah.
And I think Chicago's a very good landing spot for him. That being said, I don't really care about the optics. You know, how are the optics of Dan Campbell and that hiring, right? No one really knew. Well, like, the assistant head coach for the Saints? Really? That's who we're bringing in?
Yeah.
You know? Like, how the conversation changed now, right? Mike McDaniel. True. I remember, listen, now the conversation around McDaniel's different, but at one point, the optics were, oh my Lord, who is this guy? Like, I didn't hear his name being interviewed by anyone else. And then the Dolphins brought him in, and year one, we were like, oh, this guy's great. Of course, now the conversation's different once again, but.
Well, and I'll give you an example to support my point. How were the optics last summer when the Chargers hired Jim Harbaugh? I mean, they were jumping for joy.
No, absolutely. And that changes.
And he was clearly the big fish in that market.
And
they went out. Dean Spano stopped being a cheap ass, gave him a big contract. And last time I checked, the Chargers are significantly better this year than they were last year.
But I don't think they hired him because of the optics of it. I think they hired him because
it helped.
You know, because he was just the best coach.
No, he was the best coach, and he was the number one candidate. And they wrote the biggest check, and they were able to lure him in. And again, I see the Chargers organization much differently than I did last year when they had Braden Staley, who for a time they refused. We knew he was a lame duck for a while. They refused to fire him. He should have been fired after that playoff game, if we're being honest.
Yeah.
And then he's getting his ass smacked by the Raiders. What was it, 63-7? Whatever it was. That was
murdering.
Ridiculous. It was ridiculous.
And then he went ahead on the press box and said this happens to every coach.
Yeah, every coach loses 63-7 to the fucking Raiders. Yeah, dude, good one. So, again, from an optics perspective, the Chargers did the right thing hiring Jim Harbaugh. Not only that, but they were able to hire the right coach. A lot of times, and like I'll give fans credit because a lot of times I feel like they are smart enough to know who's a good coach and who is not. Right? Some fans are insane. Some fans are crazy. There are Patriots fans that that didn't like Belichick until he won his 4th Super Bowl. I get it. But a lot of times fans know, hey, this guy's trash, this guy's phony, and hey, this guy's really, really good. He'd be great for our football team. And I didn't hear one complaint from any people in Chargers Nation when they hired Jim Harbaugh. And he has been a fantastic coach. And it's one of those coaches where you just kind of know, hey, if we get this guy, our team is going to change. Like, we're just going to be a much better team. And again, credit to the Chargers. They went out, they did what they had to do, they got him. And I believe he's making about, if I had to check, I believe he's making about $16 million a season, which is very expensive for a head coach. But it's worth it because the Chargers more than doubled their wins, and they're probably going to win a playoff game this week.
Yeah,
At least
I mean, I
think
would hope so. I would hope so.
Yeah. Yeah.
Listen, head coaching, it's always such a fun conversation for me.
Yeah, it is.
Hasn't been overly eventful the past hour or so. I mean, the Saints just requested to interview Anthony Weaver. That's a pretty interesting one after 1 year, huh?
Yeah.
But listen, you said you had to go off. I understand you're feeling ill. Miller's
Yes, thank you.
gone, so I might have to call this quits a little bit earlier than I expected.
Yeah. No, I can stay on for a little bit longer if you want, but
if something else were to come up, I think it will be a little bit of a different conversation. But because of how this is going at the moment, it seems like a lot of the stuff was done so far.
I remember last year that the things happening kind of throughout the day. A lot of this was just in the morning. I just got
well, that was the annoying thing, and then even some of it happened earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like some of it happened yesterday.
Yeah, like the mail thing happened before the 3 p.m. game started. I was like, holy shit.
Yeah, and like the main one I'm waiting for right now is McCarthy, which is why I just looked at my phone and I saw that the Bears requesting. Yeah. I don't understand that.
Well, McCarthy's weird because they can't fire him because he's technically a free agent, right?
Yeah.
So
so I guess they wouldn't be firing him.
I think he's going back to Dallas. I think he's just going to play a little hardball.
Yeah, but so the interesting thing is the Bears still have to request access to interview him.
Which is weird, which I don't know why. I think
it's because his contract is technically still going on until the end of the league year.
Right, until like March, yeah.
So
that makes sense.
It expires January 14th, actually.
Okay,
so there you go.
They'll probably have a coach. I don't know.
Yeah. But as for I have some of the names written down. Of course, the Colts are maintaining Ballard and Steichen. If you're fine going a little bit longer, I just want to hit on some of the other stuff that happened.
Unbelievable.
If more stuff happens before we continue, we'll continue with that. But for now, let's just try and wipe out all the news while you're here, if you're willing to stay on a bit longer. This would have been what I'm doing with Miller, so I appreciate you stepping up.
Yeah, no worries. No worries.
Okay.
I could do like probably 10 more minutes.
Okay.
Ballard, to me, is one of those guys, and I don't understand this. He is such a media darling. Like, if you ask people in the media, everybody loves Chris Ballard. Everybody thinks he's a good GM. Colin Cowherd sings his praises. What has he done? What has Chris Ballard done to make this team a good football team? Anthony Richardson right now looks like a huge miss, respectfully.
Huge.
Do they have? I mean, they have a few good players. Do they have any star players? I would say no. Their defense is bad. Like what? At least you could say with other GMs, it's like okay, like Joe Sheen.
Yeah.
Malik Neighbors is a superstar.
Yeah.
Trent Baalke, Brian Thomas is a superstar.
That team is in such a bad spot. I mean, maybe JT, right? Quentin Nelson.
Yeah, the guy that they didn't want to pay, JT. Yeah. That almost ran him out of the building. Yeah, that guy.
They are in such a bad spot from like a where's this team going perspective.
Right.
Is AR the quarterback? Do you change his position? I think so.
You can't change his position. You took him number 4 overall.
But would you rather that or he rides the bench?
You gotta let it. Listen, you gotta let him play, and if he sucks, he sucks. But you can't make him like a tight end.
I think it's clear at this point he can't play quarterback, and I think part of that is because he always gets hurt. Right? You can't build an offense with your quarterback being someone that can't stay on the field. You can't. It's just impossible to do. Right?
Yeah.
Now, Ballard and Steichen, right? Ballard hasn't done anything right. This team is in such a bad spot where you have no idea where they're going. The quarterback situation, what is their identity defensively? Is Bradley going to stay there? Gus Bradley? Like, is he going to get fired? Like, what's going on there? because the defense has been bad for 2 years in a row now.
Yeah.
I don't understand the logic behind keeping what's going on there because they had an opportunity to build this team. They haven't even built a foundation. I mean, just like what I hit on with the Giants, what are you building around? There's nothing.
No.
There's nothing to build around. So I think them maintaining them makes no sense to me.
Did you just get that Tom Pelissero notification?
What, the Monken?
Yeah, Todd Monken.
Yeah. Todd Monken being interviewed for the Bears offensive coordinator spot.
And I'll say this too, like when the Colts hired Shane Steichen, I thought it was a home run hire. And this is not me agreeing with what you said about Ben Johnson, but I'm agreeing with your point about culture being so important and how you have to be able to run a team and lead a team. The culture right now in Indianapolis is dog shit.
Yeah.
I mean, we're hearing reports left and right. Guys are showing up late to meetings. They're not taking shit seriously. Anthony Richardson tapping out of a game. I thought it was a one-off occurrence. When it happened, I was kind of like, oh, whatever. I don't give a shit. Now it looks like it's part of a bigger problem.
Yeah.
And that's a reflection of the head coach. It is. Like, run your program better than that. And I don't know if you saw Pat McAfee went fucking scorched earth on him.
And that's a really bad look because he's such a franchise legend.
Because Pat McAfee is not only a huge alumnus, but he loves the Colts. And he defends the Colts constantly. So for him to go out and speak his mind like that, to me, raises a lot of real red flags. So the Colts right now are in a terrible spot. The only benefit to them is their division is not very good. Like, the Texans are probably going to run this division until further notice, but I wouldn't say that they're a juggernaut just yet. And you know, like that's the benefit, but at the same time, it's like this Colts team looks like they're going to win 7 to 8 games every single year. I don't see what their direction is. Right now, their only superstar player is Jonathan Taylor, who's an older running back, not in his prime. It's like your GM has kind of sucked for a while. Your head coach has not been able to control and corral his team. I mean, you remember last year, too, like last year they had a chance to win the South late in the year, and it kind of fell apart.
And they ended up blowing it. And Steichen had a great year, but I think now it's time. They need a change, and I think it's blatantly clear. Listen.
What pick are they going to have? They're going to have, what, like 16?
Yeah, they have like a middle pick. You said that you're feeling ill, so you have to get off. Miller's not coming back. I, myself, am feeling like shit.
Like no worse.
Huh? Yeah, I have no idea why. Today I woke up and felt awful. And right now it is starting to reactivate whatever the hell it is. So I'm going to go off stream before I puke all over my camera.
Awesome, dude.
So yeah, thank you again for everyone listening.
No worries.
I appreciate it. Thank you for coming on, Mike. I would have intended for this to be a longer thing, but I'm at peace with it not being one. It was kind of last minute put together, and I understand family emergencies get in the way. Thank you again, everyone who tagged in. I'll see you all again. You know, podcasts, all that stuff. You know my content.